Apple iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max phones are familiar yet distinctly different. They look a lot like the last Pro models. Both are a bit larger and do have Super Retina XDR displays, just a tiny bit bigger. There are some big changes on the insides, like the new A18 Pro chips, iOS 18, and yes, even some Apple Intelligence, if you can wait a bit. And by the way, that should be the star of the show, but it's been upstaged a little bit by, well, a new button. Okay, it's not officially a button, but it is called Camera Control, and it could change how you take photos with your iPhone. There is so much to talk about and so much to see. Let's get to our full review of these excellent new iPhones. First of all, these two phones are, except for size, battery capacity, and base storage, virtually identical. That means most of the experiences you find on one will be replicated on the other. For our purposes, it means that, unless I say otherwise, comments about one phone also apply to the other Pro model. You got that? Apple has settled on an iPhone aesthetic. Bigger, but not unwieldy. There's the new button in town, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max is 163 millimeters by 76.6 millimeters by 8.25 millimeters, and it weighs 227 grams. Yes, that's taller, wider, and actually 6 grams heavier than the iPhone 15 Pro Max that came before it about a year ago. Now, the iPhone 16 Pro is similarly larger than its predecessor. It's 149.6 millimeters by 71.5 millimeters by 8.25 millimeters and weighs 199 grams. Now, that weight difference is actually a little bit more than on the iPhone 15 Pro, but that's because you've now got the 5x optical zoom, and the battery, it's a little bit larger. As for the bodies, they're all grade 5 titanium with graphite-covered aluminum substrates that basically helps with some efficiency. They feel sturdy, yet comfortable in the hand. The ceramic shield, which is on the cover, did get an upgrade, but I refuse to purposely drop these phones to test it. I'll let somebody else do that. But yes, you can drop the phones in a toilet, and by the way, they'll survive just fine, but I do not recommend that you do that on purpose. You can't talk about design without addressing the button or the elephant in the room, and that is this button, which Apple doesn't like to call a button, but it is called Camera Control, and it gives you instant access to the camera app and a ton of control over settings without ever touching the screen. That means you're taking photos with just this button here. When people are done talking about Apple Intelligence or the lack of it, they'll still be talking about Camera Control. Let's talk a little bit about these displays. You'll find the same Super Retina XDR OLED on both phones, but they're both a little bit larger. That is partly because the chassis are bigger, but it's also because the bezels have been slimmed down. These are very sharp screens with an excellent contrast ratio of 2 million to 1, so that means inky blacks. Everything is going to look great on them. Photos, videos, all kinds of content, everything I looked at, I loved. There are also ProMotion displays, which means they can go from 1 Hz all the way up to 120 Hz, which means smooth motion. Yes, the dynamic island is still there. And by the way, the screens get plenty bright, 2000 nits in direct sunlight, so you can still see them. Apple might not be leading the race in display technology. There are higher resolutions, brighter nit counts, more pixels per inch to be found on competitor devices. But if you are an iPhone fan, you will not be disappointed by what you see here on the iPhone 16 Pro Max or the iPhone 16 Pro. Let's talk about cameras. So we've got a couple of nice updates across the Pros. First of all, we've got the 48 megapixel Fusion camera, which is now faster, which means you don't miss a shot or have something ruined by blurry movement. In my tests, I could stop people in their tracks, and birds with their wings, instead of flapping like just blurry, they'd be sharp, and I could still see what was going on. Very impressive. The ultra-wide camera got a huge upgrade, 12 megapixels up to 48 megapixels. And the biggest benefactor here is going to be macro shots. It's so much fun getting up close to flowers and fruit, and you can get within 2 centimeters and it is clear. The 12 megapixel 5x optical zoom, that's unchanged, but at least it's on both Pros now, which is really a big deal. Also unchanged, the 12 megapixel FaceTime camera or True Depth camera still takes excellent portrait mode selfies. On the iPhone 16 line, you can't talk about cameras without talking about the Camera Control. or the camera control button. Now, I found this button took a little bit of time to learn, but it soon became second nature. I like to use it when the phone is in landscape mode, and I don't know that it'll be super useful in portrait mode. It's a little bit awkward. I cannot wait until Apple turns on visual intelligence, which means I can quickly use the button to press and identify objects and get information on the screen. On the video front, I am excited about a pair of new features. One is the ability to shoot in 4K at 120 frames per second. What really makes that video format shine is the new speed control, which lets you step through slow motion speeds, 20%, which is 24 frames per second, 25%, which is 30 frames per second, or 50%, which is 60 frames per second. Using it adds a real cinematic feel to almost any video. Just find some people walking towards you, no need for an explosion in the background, add some cool music with GarageBand, and you have your own action movie thriller. I also like Audio Mix, which is especially useful if you have to record podcast level quality audio and you forgot your mic and you are in a suboptimal space. It did a great job of making my audio sound like it was ready for NPR. Underpinning all the hardware and updates is iOS 18, a platform update that brings a lot of changes. Photos is almost completely rearranged, which you may or may not love. Take a close look, though, at the new search. It's a lot better at finding photos you need with just a natural language query. iOS 18 offers a lot of home screen and app customization capabilities. Widgets can be almost any size, and you can finally leave gaps in your app grid. Control Center, by the way, got a huge overhaul and is insanely customizable. Do we need all that control? Yes, you do. There are tons of other updates like RCS messaging in Messages, a nifty new passwords app, and Math Notes, which is machine learning powered and may blow your mind. It lets you scribble an equation in Notes, and if you put a little equal sign at the end, it'll solve it for you and do so in your own handwriting. That's kind of wild, right? Apple Intelligence is the most touted feature, but it's arriving for most of us in fits and starts. Now, I purposely installed a dev beta so I could have access to a handful of Apple Intelligence features, but some are actually pretty cool. There are summaries and notifications and emails, writing tools that you can find in texting, emails, and notes, and they can help if you're actually not that comfortable crafting the perfect prose. I found them marginally useful, but I think I have to spend more time with them. One of Apple Intelligence's best new features is cleanup in photos. Quickly identifies objects and people to remove from photos. I used cleanup in photos to clean up a photo of my wife. She was sitting at a restaurant. Behind her were a bunch of parked cars. I didn't like them. I selected them one by one and removed all of them, and it filled in the fence that was behind them perfectly. Now, of course, Siri's getting a very big update. It has a completely new look and can maintain context, but I still wish it was a whole lot smarter. The thing is, Apple Intelligence is not entirely here yet. There are pieces that will show up in an iOS update that might be here within a few weeks. Then major bits like ChatGPT integration and image generation and Genmojis, they might not arrive until next year. Let's just say I'm intrigued by Apple Intelligence, but it's not yet a reason to buy or upgrade. The iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max are really nothing without the new A18 Pro chip that is probably the fastest mobile CPU on the market, at least according to our benchmarks. It played all my AAA games, let me edit 4K video, let me play with early Apple Intelligence, and pretty much do anything I wanted without breaking a sweat. In fact, few of us will need all of this power. Let's talk about battery life. Apple doesn't tell us the size of its iPhone 16 Pro and iPhone 16 Pro Max batteries, but they're clearly a little bigger and also benefiting from a far more efficient mobile CPU. We saw 14 hours on average from the 16 Pro and 16 hours on average from the 16 Pro Max, but they are capable of lasting even longer. All-day use is now a real thing. By the way, they both support Qi 2 charging, which means I was able to recharge to almost 50% in 30 minutes using an optional 30-watt charger and the new MagSafe charging pad. So what's the bottom line? These are the best iPhones Apple has ever made, which is, by the way, something I say every year, but it's true. They're two fantastic handsets with beautiful designs, solid builds, and stunning performance. The camera control is a big win and mostly makes up for the fact that Apple otherwise didn't touch the design. The cameras take great photos. You can even style them to your heart's content if that's your thing. Apple Intelligence is a bit disappointing, mostly because it's not here yet. But I do expect that to change soon. iOS 18, by the way, is generally a big win. These aren't the cheapest smartphones, but at least they didn't get any more expensive. For iPhone fans, these are the phones you want. Big screen fans will love the iPhone 16 Pro Max, Apple's biggest iPhone ever. And 16 Pro fans will probably love that it finally has the same zoom as the big guy. It may not be a reason to upgrade or switch, but there are no better iPhones on the market today.